Okay, as we said, floods and droughts actually go together in under global warming, especially over a place like India or actually any other place. You actually have extreme rainfall events happening, but stealing the moisture from somewhere and creating droughts as well. We looked at the droughts a little bit. Let's just touch on flood as well. This is showing flood mortality risk in deciles. So this is mortality risk defined by weighting the value of population exposure to floods for each grid cell over the globe. And the vulnerability weights are based on historical losses in previous disasters. So the mortality weights are applied to population exposure to obtain mortality risks, and the weights are an aggregate index relative to losses within each region and country wealth class over the 20-year period for 1981 to 2000. So you have to be aware of the details on how it is done, what kind of GDP is assumed, and how the vulnerability and exposure are computed, because the change in precipitation is easy enough to observe, but the rest are not always so easy. Defining a vulnerability index is also quite a detailed task. Nonetheless, looking at the risk deciles, this is in the first to the fourth decile here, but when you get to these red regions in China and India and parts of the Southeast Asia here, they are in the 8th and 10th deciles, and you have a mix of various deciles here as well. So as I said before, considering the socioeconomics, geopolitics of these regions, these are something to really worry about as not only adaptation mitigation issues, but also the reliable local projections that will be needed to make adaptations. India, for example, nice study by Roxy Matthew Cole and colleagues shows that the widespread floods, floods of the size of 10,000 square kilometers, have gone from about 2 per year to now 6 per year. So there's like a threefold increase in widespread floods, which come with lots of crop losses and so on. But does that also mean mortality is going up? Not necessarily, because early warning systems are working, better responses, better disaster management, recovery plans, and so on. So looking at global deaths from all natural disasters, which also includes earthquakes and volcanoes and so on, you can see that there is a large variability in the number of deaths, because something like a tsunami can completely dominate the mortality in a particular year. Looking at global annual deaths from natural disasters by decade and by various factors, wildfire, landslide, mass movement, volcanoes, floods, extreme temperature, and droughts, and so on, you can see that drought apparently dominated before the 1940s, and slowly it's dropped. The overall annual deaths from natural disasters has dropped, which is good news, and earthquake dominates, which is not something that is predicted as of now successfully, and is not something you can really cope with unless you make massive changes in building codes and so on, as done in California and Japan and so on, in terms of earthquake proof buildings, etc. Okay, but internal displacements of persons from natural disaster, just for 2017, you can see that there are millions of people being displaced in not only the global south like China and India, but also in the US and Somalia and so on. So this is something that is going to matter more and more. Internal displacements by climate change is already being noted, monitored, recorded in many places. It can be because there is drought in one place or flood in one place, and people move seeking employment or just getting away from disasters. If a uh, agricultural season is wiped out, Indian farmers would move. I don't know what the internal displacements within China are, but nonetheless, one can compute the risk and return on investments for various places from floods. So this is showing annual average loss as a percentage of local GDP, and where it's red it's greater than 1% and other colors correspond to less than 1%. So floods are kind of abrupt events, and depending on the recovery plan, the recovery can be quick, or in a place like Brisbane, I think 2010, where an entire sanitation system was wiped out, several $billion losses, but rebuilding such a sanitation system is not that easy. So recovery there is going to take longer, even though Australia is a rich country. So there is always a issue of cost of recovery as well, and not just mortality risk. Mortality is being reduced, but that comes with increased infrastructure loss and financial losses. This all happens in the context of global warming, where the number of population or fraction of population affected by floods at 4 degrees C warming is going to increase by a lot. So this is 400% increase over places which are red, which includes not only the global south but also the rich countries in Europe and US and so on. Okay, so where there are these hash, there is not enough confidence to say much, but this also can be looked at in terms of expected damage when we hit 4 degrees C warming. Of course, this is a very high level of warming. RCP 2.6 would be less than half of it, hopefully, but RCP 4.5 and 6 are going to get us into this range, and RCP 8.5 is definitely going to get us into this range. So expected damage in terms of percentage change is also going to be massive, 400% or more, over countries in the global south as well as rich countries. So if you think about places like Houston, let's say, that got hammered by Hurricane Harvey, I think, with massive amounts of rain, it recovered differently than New Orleans, and recovery also means permanent displacement of some people who cannot afford to come back. So there are lots of details in how the damages are computed. So it's not good news in any case. So droughts and floods are both going to be massive impacts to worry about in terms of mitigation and adaptation. And urbanization enhances the risk of flooding. For the same amount of rain, if the surface is paved, the runoff and flash floods are going to be much higher. So the risk is going to be much higher. So the resilience, reducing vulnerability and adapting to extreme events is going to be very much a urban and rural issue. And there are good literature showing that you cannot deal with them separately because they are closely related. They have to be dealt with together. If you look at my podcasts on Bending the Curve, the other course, there are lots of good podcasts on how urban green infrastructure can help deal with extreme rain events as well. Okay.